Welcome everyone to another SDEC session. Today's session is going to be one in our business intelligence topic area, and we're going to be talking about adoption. My name is Adam Greco, and I work for Search Discovery, and I'll be working behind the scenes to help answer any questions and moderate things as this session goes forward. For those of you who are new to the SDEC, we are a free educational community that offers weekly educational sessions related to digital marketing and digital analytics. I'll be putting some information in the chat. If you're not already a member, you can join for free. And if you join, some of the benefits are being notified ahead of time of sessions like this and being able to access our SDEC Slack group where we have over 50 recordings of past SDEC sessions. So if you can during the session, please use the Zoom Q&A if you have questions for our speaker, Sarah. If you have any technical questions or maybe you need some help with anything related to the SDEC, you can ping me on the chat. But for questions related to the topic, please use the Zoom Q&A. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to my coworker, Sarah Baker. Sarah, welcome and thanks for presenting.
Great, thanks very much, Adam. So I guess we will get things kicked off. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever time of day it may be for everybody. I'm glad you were able to join after hopefully everybody got to have a nice long weekend. Obviously, as Adam mentioned, my name is Sarah Baker. I am a senior business intelligence manager at Search Discovery. I spend my days working with clients to implement their BI platforms and help ensure that the work that is being done will deliver value for them even beyond our time working with them. So that leads me then to the motivation as to why I wanted to do this session. And it's because I see this happen oftentimes where we spend all this time creating these really cool BI platform implementations, these great dashboards, and then it's about time for our time with our clients to end, and you see things kind of fizzle out. So that's why this is so important, both to me just selfishly, because I want people to use the cool stuff we've built, but also because I want our clients and I want people that have different BI platforms to really see the value of them and really extend the adoption of them beyond just that initial implementation. So the goal of today's session is to help give you some things to think about at different stages of a project that will help you with your adoption of your BI platform. And of note, prior to diving into the session, I do want to call out that a lot of the concepts discussed today can and do apply beyond BI platforms and really extend to any sort of change in a company's tech stack. So even though all of my examples today will be rooted in BI platform implementations, just keep in mind that a lot of these concepts that we're talking about can really be covered throughout different types of technology implementations. So our plan for this session will be able to answer the questions that you see on the screen right now, how to build something that can be adopted, how to encourage adoption, and how to keep users and expand adoption. We're first going to cover some high-level concepts related to adoption and really set the stage around what the adoption process really looks like. And then from there, we'll dive into each of the 5 phases of the adoption process to discuss specific actions that can be taken to help encourage that adoption. So obviously, I don't know very many of you, but I personally like to include Dilbert comics in all of my sessions, any sort of presentation I'm giving, because I do think there's although ironic and humorous, there can sometimes be some accuracy in these Dilbert comics. So hopefully you guys enjoy that as well. But on a slightly more serious note, I do have this quote here. Frances Hellesbian is actually, she was the president, of the Girl Scouts of America. So I'm sure if you've had a Girl Scout cookie, you're familiar with her. But I do find this quote really important as we talk about today's topic, which is culture does not change because we desire to change it. Culture changes when the organization is transformed. The culture reflects the realities of people working together every day. So to set the stage, obviously it's one thing to say, hey, we've just implemented this new BI platform, or we've just purchased this new BI platform. But to really let you know why this is all important, average cost per year is approximately $3,000 per person for a BI platform to the company. And that's typically based on, dividing out costs of licenses, row counts, any number of different things, since each BI platform kind of has their own cost model. So I don't know about you, but $3,000 per person seems fairly significant, especially when you're considering, a BI platform can be utilized by hundreds of people within an organization. Secondarily, 48% of all organizations consider BI either critical or very important to their operations. So although I think the number probably should be higher than 48%, I still think that's a sizable enough amount to make this a topic that's relevant. And finally, Gartner expects spend on BI to rise to $29.48 billion by next year. So obviously there is a lot of money that people are spending on their BI platforms, whether it be implementation, ongoing maintenance, licenses, et cetera. So this should really kind of help highlight for you and put into perspective the reason why the adoption of these platforms is very important. And so an adoption plan, which is what we're really going to talk through today, helps with all types of people. So we've kind of gone ahead and organized the different types of people that you might have in your organization into these 4 different groups. First, there are the people that will be pushed to use the new system. People that are pushed into doing anything, whether it's using a BI platform or anything even outside of work. You can often find those people will feel frustrated, annoyed, disappointed. People don't like to be forced into doing anything. And it can help, they might develop resentment towards either the BI platform or leadership, or anything that might have actually kind of forced their hands into having to adopt a new platform. The second group of people are the people that are pulled to use the new system. People don't like to feel left out. This is probably most commonly referred to as FOMO, fear of missing out. So if someone sees enough of their peers using, a shiny new platform or doing something really neat and cool, they will sometimes feel pulled to just start to use it. Or at a bare minimum, they will ask questions about it and start their own adoption process of the platform. The third type of people are people that just have a personal desire to use the new system. Whenever I think about these people, I always picture this as right before you're getting ready to go on a road trip, and that one person, before you've even finished packing your bags, yells shotgun. They are right there. They are ready to go. In technology, they're typically called the early adopters, and they're always open to trying new things. They're excited about change, the prospect of using a new system, and they see an intrinsic value of the new platform without needing much guidance. And then finally, there's the people who will just not use the new system. This is the person that is sitting in the corner with their arms crossed that just keeps saying no. Either these people are potentially not being held accountable for using the system, and we're going to talk about accountability more in a bit, or they simply just don't care. So obviously you can see that with these 4 different groups of people, there's obviously very different motivations to why they would be using a new BI platform. And the adoption plan that we're going to talk about is really designed to kind of take into account these 4 different groups of people to help ensure that they are following along and starting to adopt the new platform. So we've got some misconceptions here, and these are misconceptions that apply to the adoption plan. And the first one is that adoption starts after the platform is configured. And we'll dive into this a little bit more when we talk about the actual phases of the adoption plan. But what's important is that the adoption starts as soon as the project starts. it is important to establish a good baseline to get people interested, excited, engaged in the new platform, and not just bringing them in at the very last minute. The second misconception is that adoption will happen through osmosis. Adoption, unfortunately, doesn't just happen by accident. This isn't like when we were in high school and we would put our textbooks under our pillows and go to sleep and kind of just think through osmosis, through the pillow, all of a sudden the knowledge of the platform is going to happen. So what's important with adoption is having a well-designed and well thought out training plan. So again, we'll get into that a little bit more, but just keep in mind that it does not just happen magically. Finally, adoption is linear and has a set end date. Adoption is not linear at all. There's many different phases, and sometimes you'll actually find that you need to go back to an earlier phase in the adoption plan and revisit some of the concepts that were discussed in it. And there is no set end date for adoption. You are never fully done with the adoption process. There will always be new features, new functionality, new resources that are going to be using a platform, and you have to continue to iterate on that adoption process as those new folks come online. So now I'm going to talk about what I would say are two critical success factors for the adoption of any BI platform. These I'm calling out separate from the adoption plan itself because I do think they are so critical, and they do touch each different phase of the adoption life cycle. But executive leadership and primary sponsors play a critical part in the success of any project throughout the entire duration of that project. People look to these individuals to set the tone about the project, and then oftentimes their reactions to the project are going to be mirrored by the employees. They look to those in those roles to demonstrate why the change is needed and the benefits that this change will bring to the organization. I've had an opportunity to work on a number of BI projects where there was turnover on the executive leadership team. And so oftentimes the person that started was a key driver in the BI platform implementation project. They were really a cheerleader and they really saw the value in it. And then either through attrition, turnover, whatever the case may be, they left the project. And then I've seen it where the person that comes in to fill the role does not then see that BI platform project as being critical. And it's almost as if the air was let out instantaneously of the balloon. Momentum is lost, general support is lost. And unfortunately, you can even at times see that a project will completely stall and never be fully completed at those times. So it's very, very important that from the very beginning of the project, there is leadership and a primary sponsor that really can kind of in many ways be the face of the project. And the second critical success factor is accountability. True accountability and the sustainability that results from it comes from developing a good technical solution to a challenge and using good change management skills to clearly set expectations, provide necessary guidance, and ensure demonstrated competency. And they also help determine the root cause for gaps and implement the right corrections to fix them. In the end, although we are all accountable for our own actions, it is important that it also rests with the person and people that own and develop the technical solution in the first place. So although I am accountable for myself and my job and leveraging the new platform, there is also some level of accountability that comes from the leadership team, and they're holding people accountable for leveraging the new platform. So it's really a little bit of a balancing act there. What's important is that there has to be knowledge of change management and the skills and competency to make sure that change is implemented and, most importantly, sustainable. So this is the adoption process. We've broken it apart into 5 different phases, And I think for those of you that are familiar with the software development life cycle, you'll see that these 5 phases align very closely to that. And again, this is done specifically for the reason that adoption process starts when the project starts. So the first phase is really going to be introducing the project, laying the groundwork for the project and making sure people are knowledgeable about what's happening. The next phase is going to be the engage phase. And this is really just making sure that people are engaged throughout the entire duration of the project. People tend to feel more of a sense of ownership and more of a sense of pride in something if they are involved for the entire duration of a project. Now, this isn't to say that we should have too many cooks in the kitchen, but this is to say that it's important to understand how people will be leveraging the platform and ensure that they're engaged at the right points as you're coming up with the requirements to make sure that they do feel some sense of ownership. The next step in the process is the build section. Now, this is often the times the people that are kind of like, oh, well, there's no need for adoption now, somebody's gone off and they're building it. That is the exact opposite of it. The build process is really a great time to continue the momentum that you built earlier, keep people in the loop, and keep building that momentum and excitement about what's going to be delivered. Then there's the apply section of the process. And this literally applies to applying the change to your existing workflows, training people, and really starting to get people to use the new platform. And then the final stage is the embed stage. And this is the one where we really see the most iterations occurring and where you'll kind of just go back and revisit all of the things that you've talked about. And this is really when you expand and enhance the platform, and also when you continue your training. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to actually dive into each of these sections in more depth and talk through each of them. So first, we're going to go over introduce and engage, and this is how to build something that can be adopted. So in the introduce phase, we've got 2 items. The first is what I like to call hello. And that's really when you determine who all from your company will be impacted by this new BI platform and understand the various impacts this will have on each group. So once you have identified the people impacted, you need to meet with them. And that then leads into setting clear expectations. Set the stage, explain what the project is, explain why this project is happening, explain the timeline for the project, explain who all will be involved in the project and what their roles are. There is no shame in the RACI matrix game. And I like to throw this in there because this is a perfect time to introduce a RACI matrix and how it applies to all of the various groups that are part of this BI platform implementation. You're also going to want to explain how the project will be approached, include details about the phases, the tasks in each phase. In general, people don't deal well with surprises, so try to avoid these. And again, a lot of this is really about sharing knowledge. And one of the things that, 2 of the questions here that are really important are, what is the cost of not changing? And why is now the time to change? And if you're able to answer those questions for people and people truly understand it, then they're much more likely to be engaged and helpful throughout the entire process. The next part we have is the engage phase of the life cycle. And the first step there is to really understand. So instead of building a solution that you think people will want, build a platform that people will need. And instead of assuming you know what people need, try to understand it. Engage with the end users of the platform to understand the use cases for how they would leverage that platform. Engage with users to understand what they need to see in the platform that will make them use it. Engage with those end users to understand what struggles that they have today with the current solution. We oftentimes see a group of individuals tasked with the BI platform implementation. However, those same people are oftentimes not the end users of the platform. So what ends up happening is a solution is built that aligns with the expectations of the platform implementation team, but not with the end users. And this is I probably cannot stress enough how important this is to engage with the end users. As I mentioned, oftentimes we start on these projects and we're told, here's the group of people that you're going to be working with. They give you the requirements, you build what the requirements were, and then you start training the end users. And then all of a sudden you find out that you've built something that does not align with their expectations. So it is very important to make sure that you have the end users of your BI platform engaged early in the adoption process so that when you are done with your build, you can ensure that you've built something that will actually meet what they need in order to do their jobs. The next item is to get buy-in. Although it would be great to have 100% buy-in from the start, I think we can all agree that that is likely unrealistic. So it's important to focus on getting buy-in where you can. For the folks that are part of the project, either part of the implementation team, the SMEs, the end users, et cetera, that are not bought in, what you should do is create a plan to keep them engaged and address their concerns. It is fair to expect that not everybody will see the immediate value in the change. So it's important, though, to not dismiss their feelings, but instead to continue to engage with them and work to address their concerns. We oftentimes find that on projects where a new BI platform is being implemented, there is a handful of folks who are very set in their ways. They've gotten very used to creating their reports in Excel. They become accustomed to the manual processes that are needed. Sometimes they've even spent years developing and honing in on their current process. Instead of dismissing these people, it's important to work with them through this process to help them see the value of this change. It is also important to not get discouraged because it is quite possible that you will not get buy-in from everybody. That is, again, simply reality. What is important, though, is focusing on those who are bought in or who will likely be bought in. Now we will talk about how to encourage adoption as part of the build phase. Once the implementation starts, it is important to keep the momentum going. You've spent a lot of time laying the groundwork of introducing the project and engaging the various stakeholders. But now that implementation has started, it's important not to go down to the basement and not be heard of for a few months. So the implementation phase is crucial for the obvious reason that it is needed in order to implement the platform. Keep everybody involved by providing status updates about the project. Be sure to celebrate and highlight key milestones. When a new data source is connected, let the team know. When a dashboard is being built, let the team know. Keep them posted on the status and on the timeline. And then second to that, it's important to have user feedback. So initially, you get a first set of requirements in that engage phase. You start working on the project in the implementation phase. Instead of waiting until the end of this phase to show your work, engage with the end users throughout the process to show them what is in process. This will give them the opportunity to feel connected to the project and will also give them the opportunity to provide feedback that can possibly be incorporated before the phase is completed. Consider a dashboard that was built and all of the metrics are shown on a weekly basis. When reviewing this with the end users, you might learn that they only report on metrics once they have data for a complete month, since there is a lot of variability that happens over the course of that month. It's a very easy change in many BI platforms to move from showing metrics at a weekly level to showing them at a monthly level. Not only, though, are you making the product more user-friendly, but you got feedback from those end users and have shown them that the platform can be easily adjusted to meet their needs. Also, it's important to be comfortable telling the end users that a requested modification is outside of the initial scope, but assure them that their requests will be added to the project backlog. So again, It's important that you can be flexible and iterative as you are working through things, but also be sure to balance that with being able to manage the scope that's been given as part of the project. And make sure you feel comfortable telling them that, hey, this is something that we'll address, in phase 2, but let them know where that information is so they can check on the status of things within their backlog. The next item that we're going to talk about is how to keep users. So the first one is process change. Even though change is a scary word, it doesn't have to be. If your company has a process currently in place for reporting or a way in which key metrics are being reviewed, considering a change to that process. It's okay to not jump right into the deep end, but set realistic expectations for when the process will be fully changed. A good example of this would be if your company sends weekly emails regarding marketing performance, and then does a large monthly readout on the overall month's marketing performance. Instead of immediately changing to saying, that all reporting needs to be done using the new BI platform, consider a scaled approach whereby the first month, all weekly reports are done from the new BI platform, and the monthly report stays in its original format. Then in the second month, all weekly reports can be done from the BI platform, and so can the monthly report. Typically, we find that change is much easier to digest in small bites. So instead of being like the magician that pulls out the tablecloth and all of the glasses fall and people are shocked, instead consider slowly lifting the glasses and moving them. And just take baby steps so that people have a chance to get comfortable with that new process. And the next item is training. Oftentimes, the biggest barrier to adoption is actually just in terms of the training. Ongoing training is important in regards to platform adoption as it ensures that the end users are being shown the various ways to use the platform. Don't forget that not all users of the platform are at the same skill level. So some considerations you might want to make are that you might need to have multiple training sessions per year on the same topic as a refresher course, or to capture new hires or people new to the platform. Also consider that you might need to have different training courses based on the various users of the platform and their roles. For instance, you might need to have a training session specific for power users, for instance, people who will be doing ad hoc data analysis within the platform, and then a training session specific for basic dashboard consumers, those folks that will just simply be logging into the platform and will be what I would consider consumers of the dashboards. It's important to know your audience and develop a training curriculum that evolves as your use of the platform evolves. Iteration. Just because you can check the box that the platform has been implemented, you need to continually iterate on it. As people are using the dashboards, it's guaranteed that new requests will come up. Oftentimes, it's impossible to develop for all the requirements in the first pass, and instead it is important to focus on creating a solution that can be used as efficiently as possible, but it is also important to maintain a backlog of requests. We oftentimes get an initial collection of requirements, which will include the list of metrics, that people want to report on, the dimensions they want to be able to filter on, and the types of visuals they want to see. However, until this has been fully implemented and put to the test, there will likely be requests for changes. It's important for both the implementation team and the end users to understand that the first version is not the final version. And then the final phase is how to get more users. Expansion. Many times the initial implementation of a BI platform is limited to one department, a few use cases, or a limited number of data sources. It's important that after the initial implementation that you expand that footprint. You can do this in a number of different ways. You can look to expand the data sources that are implemented. You can look to expand which departments in the company are using the platform. You can look to extend the business questions that are being answered. But in general, this expansion can take many different different flavors. But this is a way to kind of embed it and get it into part of your company's kind of DNA. Many BI platforms do have multiple releases a year. These releases can include behind the scenes performance improvements all the way down to incremental changes to how visualizations are built. Ensure that the platform owners are aware of these enhancements and leverage them where appropriate. People always like the shiny new toy, and even small enhancements can go a long way. So consider sharing release notes with your power users, or even creating specific release notes for your users, highlighting key enhancements that they should be aware of. And then finally, as most people might be saying right now, training is in here again. Time and time again, we've seen a lack of initial training or a lack of ongoing training being a large barrier to adoption. Not only will new people start using the platform as part of expansion, but new features and functionality will be introduced. You need to make sure that as the platform evolves, so does the training. We have seen BI platforms introduce multiple new visualization templates or new data transformation functionality. And unless we train the people using the platform, then those new features may go unused, or maybe even worse yet, used incorrectly. So now that we've kind of talked through the 5 different phases of adoption, it's really time to start adopting. So 4 key items to keep in mind are: adoption is achievable. Many organizations believe that once they've built an infrastructure for successful adoption, that their job is complete. However, adoption is an ongoing process that keeps evolving as you explore more opportunities with new features and functions within your platform. Adoption is essentially a repeated process that involves continuous awareness, growth and understanding, and enablement. Determine how to measure adoption. Even if you manage to achieve company-wide adoption, you also should consider if it is empowering users to access data whenever, wherever, and whichever way they want. Real success depends on what value the tool is bringing to your business, and this requires defining KPIs to track actual usage across the enterprise. Metrics such as how many departments or functions use the platform, or even how many users access the dashboards regularly, will give you a more clear picture of the adoption rate. So again, it's one thing to give everybody access, but it's another to truly understand how they're interacting with the platform. No such thing as formulaic adoption processes. A lot of businesses consider adoption as a definitive destination that typically involves extended the platform throughout the entire organization. While the number of regular users is definitely a good metric to look at, you'll need to gauge the impact of the platform in your organization. The definition of adoption can be fluid and context specific. So again, what adoption means for one company doesn't always mean the same thing for another company. For some companies, they focus solely on the total number of users in each department as a way to define adoption success. However, other companies view a successful adoption as their overall company becoming more focused on being a data-driven culture. So obviously, the more subjective your measure of adoption is, the harder it will be to say when you've reached 100% adoption. However, if you define adoption at the start of the implementation and tie it back to your company's strategy, you will better be able to define your progress towards adoption success. And then finally, it's okay to not know. Oftentimes, people struggle with ambiguity or knowing where to start. And that is okay and perfectly normal, especially when your organization is embarking on a new journey like a new BI platform. What is important to remember is that you should have awareness of the adoption process and continue to review it and adapt it as needed for your organization. Again, nobody's going to know all of the answers right away, but it's just important to keep this as something that is always present as part of the implementation process. And then finally, I will end this with one final quote. It is important to meet people where they're at, but not leave them where they're at. The point of adoption is not just to brute force the change onto people, but instead to listen to them and understand where they are coming from. Bridging the gap between your own expectations and where the other person is coming from. It means intentionally listening to understand their values, needs, and desires. So with that, I think if we want to, Adam, open it up to questions, we can definitely do that.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. As you were speaking, I kept thinking you were talking about tools like Adobe Analytics and Google Analytics too, because every single thing you said probably applies to that as well. So if anyone out there has questions for Sarah, please post them to the Zoom Q&A now. While we're waiting for more questions to come in, right now we just have one. Sarah, how have you solved the buy-in issue? Set up meetings, provide documentation, training. Basically, Sean is interested in knowing, how do you get people to buy in?
Yeah, that's definitely a good question. And I think buy-in is probably one of the hardest parts of the entire adoption process, because typically once you get people bought in, they're more willing to listen to trainings and more willing to utilize the new tool. So oftentimes buy-in, you can work through it in a number of different ways. Obviously, I know you mentioned, Sean, in your item, set up meetings. I think setting up meetings is definitely important. But what's most important is ensuring the content that you have in those meetings is appropriate for that audience. So within an organization, obviously, you're going to be looking to get buy-in at different levels. For instance, there's going to be the people that are going to be using the BI platform on a day-to-day basis to do their jobs and make business decisions. And then there might be those folks that will basically only use the reports that come out of the BI platform as a way to kind of get, a pulse of how the business is doing. So it's really important to create meetings and topics that are appropriate for the audience to get them to buy in. And I also think it's important to understand why they're not bought in. It's much easier to address people's concerns if you actually know what they are. So I strongly encourage, open dialogue. I've been on projects before where some people have said, I am not using it because it doesn't give me enough granularity in my data. Okay, we can work through that. We can talk through a plan for how are we going to get to the level of granularity that you need. I'm going to better understand why it is that you are reporting at that level of granularity. So it's really about understanding what they're using the platform for and working to get them bought in by kind of trying to remove any of the barriers that are there.
Okay, next question from Eric. What are some creative incentives to get new users to adopt the system?
Gosh, I mean, certainly it's not creative, but obviously money makes people do things. But in all honesty, I think a lot of what it is almost make it fun. Get people comfortable using the system, and show them how to do it. And then in terms of a way to incentivize them, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey guys, we're going to have a lunch and learn, free lunch. You're going to come in. We're going to show you exactly how to build the reports that you have got. People are typically more apt to listen and be more engaged when there's food involved. But certainly working to kind of just meet people where they are, and making sure you understand what are things that they would incentivize them. One other good incentive is obviously mentioning that this is a time saver. And help show them how this will help them save time in their day-to-day tasks. And that will definitely be more of an incentive to get them to use it.
Okay, Chris asks, have you seen any BI platforms that are particularly intuitive or engaging for general users, maybe non-techie users, to adopt, or particularly well suited for both general and advanced users?
Yeah, so I've definitely, I guess I could say I've had the pleasure or honor of working on a variety of different BI platforms. And I would definitely say some are better than others at getting somebody that's maybe not technical engaged and using the platform. And I think, to be honest with you, a lot of things to keep in mind are really upfront in that dashboard design and build process are important, because I think a lot of the times, even if the implementation team might find a platform to be more difficult to use or maybe clunkier, if you make conscious decisions drawing your build process and understand how the end users will be interacting with it, you can build dashboards in virtually any platform that are going to be usable, especially for the quote unquote non-techie users. But I think this all still goes back into keeping people engaged during the build process, and letting them see what is being built and getting feedback so that you can understand if what may seem to not be clunky to you might be clunky to them, and then you can iterate on it and build things out that are more appropriate. But again, I think each BI platform has its pros and cons. But in the end, if you build out your dashboards, fully understanding your end users and your audience, you should be able to use any of the platforms to build out something that is user-friendly.
Okay, next question. Sean asks, how have you resolved the preparing the data for visualization for organizations that have data that isn't really or haven't taken the necessary steps? What requirements do you typically try and deep dive for?
So honestly, the first place that I start is I just ask, what kind of reporting are you doing today? And that can be anything from somebody showing me a random, completely hand curated Excel sheet, all the way down to complex visualizations that they are creating in Excel and using all sorts of different plugins. So usually I like to start from that perspective and just understand what they're doing today. And then from there, I like to also talk through what are possibilities within the platform that we're using. Show them examples, show them what some of the visualizations are, and help them understand what it takes to get from current state to future state, and let them be involved in that process so that they can understand what's needed, and help be a part of the journey as you work on it. There's oftentimes, I know we say it a lot in BI implementations, but garbage in, garbage out in terms of the data that we're getting. And so oftentimes, sometimes it takes all the way down to the visualization process before people even realize sometimes that their data isn't in the right state. So I think it's a journey, and you definitely have to be very iterative as you work through it.
Okay, so Sarah, we have time for one more question. Before I jump to that question, I don't know if you have a final slide where you have your contact information or not. If not, maybe throw your contact information in the chat just so people know like how to reach out to you if they have questions that they can't get directly. This next question probably could be a half an hour discussion, so we'll have to do it really quick. But the one and only Brent Dykes asks, is it realistic to expect everyone to use BI or analytics tools? Is the bar too high if we expect everyone to become citizen data citizens? Or I don't know if that was meant to be citizen twice, but I'm sure everyone should read Brent's book, and I'm sure he has an opinion on this, but I don't know, Sarah, if you want to take a crack at that.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely, like you said, I think, yes, this is something that we could probably have a completely own session on. I don't know that it's realistic to expect everyone to use BI or analytics tools. I don't know. I struggle with a binary of all or none. So I do think it is probably somewhere in the middle. But I do think that it's realistic to expect that if you are doing some sort of reporting or data analysis, that you are able to leverage some of the more advanced tools, a BI or an analytics tool. So I do think that's realistic, but again, I'm not necessarily sure that it's an all or none and completely binary. And I think a lot of it also comes from the company culture that you're in as well. I think there's obviously, like I even mentioned in my presentation, are you a data-driven culture? And if your company is not that way, then I think it's hard to expect people that work there to be 100%, into BI or analytics tools. So I think it probably also starts at a cultural level within the company to get people to that point. So hopefully that answers your question, Brent. But I mean, like I said, I think that's probably a conversation that we could probably have, its own SDEC session on its own.
Yeah. Exactly. And I'll probably ask Brent to lead that. Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. And thanks everyone for joining. I think that's all we have time for. So we'll close it up here. But everyone have a wonderful week. And Sarah, thanks again.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, everybody.